Hi, I'm your host, Marsha Florence, and as usual, we have a wonderful show. Hurry back.
Today, all around you, there are extraordinary people doing the most ordinary things. Spending time with their kids. Breaking a sweat at the gym. Finding something tasty to make for dinner. Living their lives. And while they have to put more effort into it than most of us, and more time, and a larger amount of will, you won't find them asking for sympathy. You won't find them asking for praise. Only for the chance to get up and do it all again tomorrow.
Hi, I'm your host, Marsha Florence with Just Ask. And today our guests are Michigan Developmental Disability Council, Vandella Collins, Executive Director, and Claudia Combs-Wise, Public Policy Analyst. Welcome, ladies, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Usually, as we always start off, we have a list of questions we like to ask, and either one of you may anytime jump in and answer the questions. Could you tell us, if possible, Vandella, I'm sorry, not possible, I know you can, about the Michigan Developmental Disability Council? Give us a history on it.
The Developmental Disability Councils across the country came into existence via federal law. Public Law 103-230 dictates that each state will have a planning council to advise the governor on issues and policy and issues pertaining to individuals in the state with developmental disabilities. And here in Michigan, our council was formed through an executive order 1984 by then Governor James Blanchard. We currently serve as the planning council for the state of Michigan, ensuring that the citizens in Michigan with developmental disabilities have their needs met and have their voices heard in regards to public policy.
Okay, now when you say developmental disabilities, could you elaborate on developmental disabilities? What type, or is there a particular type?
Developmental disabilities are disabilities that individuals under the age or by the age of 5 years old have chronic and severe disabilities that affects three major life areas in their language, motor skills, and their cognitive skills. Some examples of developmental disabilities could be cerebral palsy, and also just chronic mental illness and mental retardation.
So at any point, it could be a existing condition that took place during birth and
up to the age of 18.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And how does one come in contact with your agency, so to speak?
We are the state advocacy organization, and we're not a particular service provider organization, but individuals will receive services through other entities in the state. We, again, work with various community organizations that provide services to individuals with developmental disabilities. We do, in our particular advocacy efforts, work with the local communities, and we also work with individuals in terms of policy development for the state to advocate for systems change, making sure that individuals with developmental disabilities can receive the services that they need in order to fully participate in their communities and be fully integrated.
Okay. Now, when you say you're like the advocacy for persons, do people normally write letters to you and let you know what their conditions are or the services they have not received and looking forward to or trying to locate? Is that what
That's one way that individuals come in contact with our agency. Oftentimes, when the legislatures are making policy, making rules that will affect individuals with disabilities, they contact us, or Claudia may be in contact with them, so to ensure that the policies that they're developing don't have an adverse effect on individuals with developmental disabilities. Other ways that individuals come in contact with us is through demonstration grants that we have throughout the state. We provide demonstration grants to local service providers to ensure that individuals with developmental disabilities can participate in programs that's going to enhance their livelihood, enhance their skill development, and really help them to fully participate in the community. So they wouldn't necessarily know that the Developmental Disabilities Council is sponsoring a particular program that they're in, but when we advocate for systems changes, we're advocating at the state level, and so it filters down throughout the communities in that way also. Other ways that...
I'm sorry, but when you say grants, are the grants going to, well, nonprofit organizations or made-for-profit? Do they go to nonprofit or not, or made-for-profit organizations?
Typically, we work with nonprofit organizations, but we can work with for-profit organizations. We prefer to work with nonprofit organizations. But if for-profit organizations respond to our request for proposals for grants, and they can provide a service that is very valuable to the citizens of Michigan, then we will work with those organizations also.
Is there a set time to put in for a grant proposal or something, or how does one know when to apply for the grants?
Each 3 years we develop a 3-year state plan, and in that particular plan we as an organization outline what our priorities are for the year, for those 3 years. And within that state plan, individuals can read the priorities and understand which years that we are anticipating letting grants out for that particular demonstration project. Individuals can receive copies of our 3-year plans. Also, they can request them from our office, and we do publish a newsletter that goes out to the communities, and it advertises, so to speak, what our granting cycle is.
Okay. Now, you ladies are both from Lansing, but does the newsletter and the information that you provide, does that service trickle down to the Wayne County and Oakland County area?
That's a statewide newsletter.
Okay.
We have a database of over 800 individuals and organizations that receive our newsletter on a monthly basis.
Okay, now, Claudia, could you give us a little insight on your position and how did you come associated with the organization? And first of all, Claudia, if you don't mind, I know your title is Public Policy Analyst. We see that you have your service provider dog here with you. Can you give us your service provider dog's name?
Right. Her name is Kelly, and she's a leader dog.
Okay. And what agency provided Kelly?
Leader Dogs for the Blind in Rochester, Michigan. Kelly's my 4th dog I've gotten from them.
Okay. And what is your role at Michigan Developmental Disability Council?
I'm a public policy analyst, and what that means is that I track legislation in Michigan, and I take a look at how bills that are introduced before the legislature may have an impact on people with developmental disabilities. And then I advocate on behalf of that legislation. If we think that a particular piece of legislation is going to be detrimental to people with developmental disabilities, what we do is we set up a line of communication with the legislature, letting them know what our concerns are. It's a two-way street. So I'm like the communication, I facilitate the communication between our office and the legislature.
Okay, now, is there a survey type format that you have to use to analyze when a service is needed or not, or what's the procedure for analysts to determine what may be needed and what's not?
Well, I basically keep on top of what salient issues are for people with developmental disabilities in the state and also nationwide. And then as bills are introduced, it's a matter of analyzing how a piece of legislation could affect policy that it's going to impact people with disabilities. For example, I was very involved a couple of years ago. Michigan completely revamped their mental health code, which had major impact on people with disabilities in Michigan. And I was involved in that process that lasted for several months, going to many committee hearings, speaking with all the legislative staff involved in that process, and making them aware of issues that we felt were important to bear in mind when they're forming policy.
Now, is there by chance, ladies, that there's something, a service a person or an organization may think that they need and it gets turned down, and you all have to decide that, make that decision if something should be accepted or rejected, is that a dual role for either one of you?
As an advocacy organization, if in fact issues are brought to our attention that we think needs to have some advocacy, we do have a direct link to the governor's office in terms of advocating for that particular issue. But typically, agencies that have issues that have been rejected, if you will, don't necessarily come through our particular organization for advocacy efforts. But if we learn of the issues and want to advocate for them or believe that it would be in the best interest of the citizens with the developmental disabilities here in Michigan to have our input, we will advocate on behalf of whatever the issue is.
Okay.
And we also will tell people where they can go if they need particular assistance of any type. We get calls often asking, you know, where can I go to get this particular type of assistance? And we'll say you need to go to your local community mental health board, or you need to go to your local center for independent living. We will let them know where the service may be currently existing. And
So someone actually can call you and speak to you directly
Sure.
and try to find out what they need to know.
And if we
Yes.
can't help them, we'll tell them where they can go to get help.
Okay. Okay, well that's good to know, because a lot of people don't realize that they can call their council, express to their council what their needs are, or what they feel may be a benefit to persons with disabilities or a handicap, or the elderly. They don't realize that they can actually call, and I didn't know that either, so it's really a plus to find that out.
Sometimes if individuals have a concern and they contact their representative, the representative will in turn call us to ask where can we steer this person in terms of getting the services that they would like to have.
Now when you say representative, you don't mean state representative, do you?
Right?
Yes.
I mean their state representatives, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And part of what we do also, Vandella mentioned our demonstration grants. We have a very heavy focus on enabling people to advocate on their own behalves. A lot of our demonstration grants are focused on educating people to the governmental process and how they can become more involved in their government and making their voice known to their to the legislature. For example, becoming involved on school boards, or becoming involved on city councils or local transit authorities. Our focus is very heavily on consumer self-determination and self-advocacy.
Okay.
So we're not just out there doing it for them. We want people to learn how to speak up and be their own voice.
Right. Okay, that's wonderful. Okay. In the event that a person, you know, likes to become involved, can they actually get input from you all to how to become involved? Is there a format that they can use to say how they want to become involved in something?
Currently, we have 43 RICs. Those are Regional Interagency Coordinating Committees, and that covers the majority of the state of Michigan. And those are local committees where individuals can be involved. They can join those particular committees and have their voices heard at the table in terms of issues that will affect their lives in their local communities. The RICs are sponsored by the Developmental Disability Council. And we coordinate activity with them. So once individuals are involved in their local community, in turn, their RIC chairperson will bring their issues back to the DD Council, and as a council, we can continue to provide assistance to them in becoming more involved in the committee activity, and also involved in local government.
Oh, okay. Okay, ladies, let's go into a commercial break and come back and talk a little more. Be right back. Okay, how's that?
This is my daughter. This is her photograph. She still hasn't come home. Not in 10 years.
Have you seen my son? She asked me. Have you seen my son?
Seems that only yesterday she was a little angel in my arms. Now she's a young lady, a student. Another disappeared.
Have you seen my son? He had a shining scar on his temple and rose-colored lips.
Every night I say goodbye to her. I kiss her.
Have you seen my son? She asked me. Have you seen my son?
Isn't it true that she is so pretty? but she has an angel's face.
Have you seen my son? She asked me. Have you seen my son?
It seems as if she were alive.
Men, women, children, unjustly imprisoned, tortured, executed, or disappeared. Every day, Amnesty International shines a light on such cases wherever they occur. Call 1-800-55-AMNESTY and raise your voice for those who can't. It's your human right.
Hi, welcome back to the second half of the show. We have Michigan Developmental Disability Council, Vandella Collins, Executive Director, and Claudia Combs-Wise, Public Policy Analyst. Now, ladies, getting back to our conversation in reference to the council, Claudia, I did want to ask this particular question of you. Can you give us a brief history of your disability and how you became involved in everything with the Developmental Disability Council?
Sure. My parents discovered that I was losing my sight when I was age 5, but it actually had started happening when I was about 2, but it wasn't detected until I was age 5. And doctors were very stymied. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me because I looked to be a perfectly healthy child. But finally, the National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, figured out that I had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, but it had not affected any part of my body but my eyes. And I had no other symptoms of arthritis throughout my life. I lost my sight gradually. I could see color until I was about 13, and then I lost all my light perception when I was 17. So I had sight for most of my childhood. Now, as an adult, an aging adult, I do have the other symptoms associated with arthritis that are causing havoc in my life.
Okay.
So, how I became involved with the DD Council, I've worked for the state since 1984, and the Developmental Disabilities Council is administered under a state agency, and I began working for the Developmental Disabilities Council in 1992.
Okay. Now, I wanted to ask you a question in reference to your disability. You say it was a form of arthritis?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I'm sure, you know, our viewing audience and listening audience may not be aware that arthritis can be effective to the eyesight. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's probably pretty surprising.
Right.
So as you were coming up, you were gradually losing your sight, but however, you're still functioning on an everyday level like any other child?
Right, yes.
Okay.
I was very fortunate. It's really been an interesting experience for me working for the Developmental Disabilities Council, because I didn't really realize how lucky I was throughout my childhood, because I had a very supportive family, and I was in inclusive education from elementary school all the way through high school. I was never put in an institutional type educational setting. I was mainstreamed from the very beginning, and that's a very crucial thing, healthy thing to happen for a child with a disability, mm-hmm. is to have them integrated into the community as early as possible. And back in the 1960s, 1950s, when I was in school, that wasn't a common thing to have happen. The majority of blind children went to an institutional type setting for their education. Since I've been working for the council and doing advocacy work, I now realize the benefits that I had, and I really see the need for advocacy. I was lucky in that I had the supports in place that I needed, but I was just very fortunate. There are some people who don't have those supports, and that's what our role is as an agency, is to advocate on behalf of those individuals to affect policy making so that those supports are put into place so that they can live in the community with everybody else.
Okay. Now, does your disability affect your way of living or your work at all?
Sure it does. A very important piece of legislation that's helped me with my work is called the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Okay. That
was passed a few years ago. What that act did is it required, it's law that any governmental agency, publicly funded agency, has to provide reasonable accommodation for a person with a disability in order for them to work. Now what that means in my case is that my dog, for example, is allowed to come to work with me. I have a voice synthesizer on my computer so that my computer can talk to me, because the majority of the work I do a lot of paperwork. And obviously I have to be able to read what the bills that I'm working on. And so the DD Council purchased the software that I needed in order to be able to use a computer. They also provide me with a person that reads for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's called reasonable accommodation. And before ADA was in effect, people with disabilities didn't have a leg to stand on in terms of requiring employers to provide these kinds of supports.
Now, do you feel that the ADA has not only opened up the doors, but made it somewhat mandatory for these assisted programs to be developed?
It's mandatory that, well, let me put it this way. It's against the law to discriminate against a person with a disability. In other words, before ADA, I had employers say to me, prospective employers where I'd be trying to get a job, well, you can't work for me, you're blind.
Right.
Well, today, an employer could never say that.
Right.
That's
Okay.
clearly against the law. That's discrimination.
Okay. I find that in the job market, though, that most of the young persons with disabilities may find it more challenging to look for work or to come upon work than those of us who have went through the structure already ourselves. There should be more leaders, and I do want to use the word leaders, in saying that we have jobs and there are jobs out there for persons with disabilities.
That's part of what we do as an advocacy organization. We really advocate for individuals to be an integral part of their own community, which means that they should be able to live where they want to live, work where they want to work, and have leisure activities where they choose to. And employment is an integral part of who we are and how we function within our society. As an advocacy organization, we strongly advocate for individuals to participate in their local communities, to actually advocate with the school systems, to work with the teachers and the administrators to ensure that individuals are receiving an appropriate education as the law requires. And yes, it is difficult for individuals with disabilities to break into the world of work, but it's not impossible.
Right. Now, I know in my own experience, being a person that's hearing impaired, some jobs had asked me, well, what is it that you need? And I think that when you first get in the job, you don't know what you need. I'm like, this is my first experience here, and I don't know what to ask for. But along the way, if I have a job that consists of a telephone, I have an amplifier on the phone or a flashing light, a lot of things that I may use may be at home, the system that wakes me up and things like that. But on the average, I know because as I speak, and I speak clearly, a person would say, oh, she doesn't have an impairment, or no, she hears pretty well. You can say that on one end, but then if I'm working, or I'm in an environment that's noisy, I can miss out on a lot of things.
Clearly, it's the individuals with disabilities as they join the workforce will need various modalities for training. But I think that's true of the general population also. All of us go into jobs needing some time to learn the job and making sure that we are equipped to do the very best we can. All too often, employers may be afraid to hire an individual with a disability, thinking that it's going to cost them more money in terms of adaptive equipment, and those types of things. But natural supports are always in place in a workforce, because as an able-bodied individual, you may need some assistance from a coworker in order to do something. That same coworker can provide some assistance to an individual with a disability, and it really doesn't cost the employee anything extra. And I think that's important for employers to recognize. One of the things that we recognize is that individuals with disabilities in the state of Michigan are not employed in record numbers. In fact, the unemployment rate for individuals with disabilities is astronomical. We also believe that those individuals can fully participate in jobs that are currently available without undue hardship to an employer. So we advocate for employers to take the chance and hire individuals with disabilities.
Now, do you feel that there's a lot of fear? The employers have a lot of fear. Like you said, at one point, some of them may feel that it's a lot of money being spent for services.
Absolutely.
And I feel as though some of them are in fear of, to me, learning something new. I think that if they would just, and I shouldn't say they, but the average person without a disability should somehow either take a course in communicating with persons with disabilities or just open their doors, period.
And that's why the council has taken a position on inclusion. We believe that if individuals are fully included in the communities, prospective employers, prospective schools will have opportunity to interact with individuals at an early age, and that fear will subside, and they will understand how to interact with individuals with disabilities. And
our school system can start early by having a mixture of persons with and persons without disabilities, so that children will learn to interact at an early age and understand the care of a person with a disability. Because not only are the children in your own personal home learning, but those who your children play with or see in school every day.
Well, we as a council believe in inclusive education and believe that non-disabled students stand to learn as much from students with disabilities as students with disabilities can learn from students that are able-bodied. So we do have a very strong position on inclusive education.
Okay, now I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
I was just going to say, of course, you know, like Vandella's been talking, we have a heavy focus on consumer education, meaning that we educate people with disabilities. But it's also important that people, what I like to say to people is you just need to keep an open mind. It's really, I see the biggest barrier in our culture is societal attitude. And, but I see, in my lifetime, I see that society has become more accepting, but they still have a long way to go. People need to remember just to keep an open mind and not to prejudge.
It's a slow process, but I think with the new laws in effect and with all the new ideas and concepts being developed every day, it breaks a little bit of the barriers. Just like this show, it breaks some of the barriers of the information that we need. Ladies, in the closing of our show, could you take a minute out, both of you, and tell us what areas of society or work would you like to see some changes in? What type?
Well, like I just said, I really feel that societal attitude is a major barrier to inclusion. And I think the more people we have with disabilities mainstreamed, living in the community, working in the community, going to school in inclusive settings, the more people we have demonstrating living in an integrated way, that minds will begin to be opened. And that's really the battle that's ahead of us.
Okay. And Ms. Collins?
I strongly believe that as we become more tolerant of individuals and recognize that disability is a function of life, and understand how the role that disability actually plays in life, we would become more tolerant as a society and make greater strides even for more inclusive settings for everyone.
Okay. In the closing, ladies, is there a number that you can give our audience in case someone needs to call and ask some questions? Do you all have a number?
Right. We can be reached at area code 517-334-6123.
Okay. Well, ladies, I'd like to thank both of you for coming on the show, and anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome. And as usual, we know that we always close the same way. This is Marsha Florence from Just Ask, and if you know anyone that has a disability, don't be afraid to ask. Just ask. Thank you.
I've had the same friends since I was a little kid. But this year, some of them started playing with these other kids. But they weren't like us. They were, different. And I heard my